Perfect.
Are we winning now? We are.
Yeah. No, we're
Sorry
hurling,
about that. It's easier to get cows in Calfton to operate this. Okay. So basically, thank you for asking me here tonight. And I think as herd owners, I mean, and looking at dairying and looking at your dairy farm, what most herd owners need out of their farm is a good work-life balance. They don't want to be working the whole time. So I mean, they also want to have hobbies and family life and so forth. It needs to be profitable. Second thing then is there needs to be, you need to be healthy while you're doing it and good for well-being so we can attract, I mean, workers, I mean, into the farm when we need it. You need to protect your assets, reduce time per cow and lean farm systems. So basically what we need to do is to capture, I mean, all the actual herd owners' needs. And one thing now that we really need to address is the actual environment. And what I've put up here now in the top screen is the roadmap for 2027. And basically what that is looking at is milk solids. As we go from 2019 to 2027, we need to increase the milk solids up to 465. At the moment, the Bandon average is 425. Increase grass utilisation, also increase the EBI from 90 to 140. The current Bandon, I mean, is 106. Increase our 6-week calving rate from 62 to 78. So I mean, Bandon is 64% here. Because by increasing the milk solids per cow, more grass, higher EBI, higher 6-week calving rate, what we'll end up with, so I mean, is reduced methane. Then below it is the MAC curve, which you're reasonably familiar with, and you can see that dairy EBI has a huge impact. So I mean, it has a big an impact on it as the actual fertilizer type, as the width, so I mean, is the impact. But also, it, so I mean, it'll actually make your money as opposed to the fertilizer costing you money. So with the environment, what we basically need to do is lift the milk solids per cow profitably and from grass, increase the EBI and increase the 6-week calving rate. And then if we look at the product we're producing, so I mean, through Carberry, we need to produce it from grass because what our claim is here in Ireland, so I mean, is 95% grass fed. And we're exporting, so I mean, over 90% of what we're doing. And our USP is happy cows grazing, so I mean, the rolling pastures. So we do need to coincide the lactation curve with the grass curve. So cows are getting, so I mean, 95% of the diet as fed from grass. So what that leads us to is a compact calving period, a compact breeding period, so I mean, and then a period of actually drying off. So what we basically have is the growth and the feed, so I mean, are reasonably well aligned, and we can pick off the surpluses here then, so I mean, and feed them actually at the shoulders. So the other thing we need is we need to be profitable, right? And what we need to do is analysis there that Max Keller helped us with there in ICBF of 4,500 spring milk cows. It takes 250 kilos of milk solids to maintain a cow. And these in herds that were doing the profit monitor. So roughly costing 1,188 to keep a cow in a low cost herd. So if you're talking about 1,188 to keep a cow in a low cost herd, and then if you look, so I mean, at the bottom 20% of herds just producing 264 kilos, they're only barely making, I mean, the cost of keeping the cow. The bottom 40% are producing 355. So I mean, so they have a gross per cow of nearly 1,700. Then you have the average, and then you have the top 40%. And if you take the average 20% at 400 kilos, they have a gross per cow about 1,900. And for 100 cows, so I mean, before labour, tax, so I mean, land rental and so forth, so I mean, you're talking about 73,000. So there's a huge difference as we go from 7,400 here up to 73 in the middle, so I mean, up to 126. And in our roadmap there, where we were speaking about was, so I mean, going up somewhere, so I mean, between here. So, but we also have to make sure that we don't confuse production with profit, because it has to be profitable production. But we need to make sure that every cow on the farm is making her keep and more. Now, I pulled off there a Bandon Co-op report, and if we look there at the average milk solids, so I mean for Bandon Co-op is 425. And I think for any of you looking at the breeding season, the Co-op report is a very, very useful place to start, because it'll tell you where are you, right? We're at 425. I mean the Bandon average, the top 10% are 524, right? We need to get to minimum anywhere 465. Right, the average fat here is 406, the average protein is 347. We do need to cut down the cell count, because the one thing we need to do for carbon going forward is we need to increase the longevity of the cows. We need to keep cows for between 4 to 5.5 lactations. So the two ways of keeping cows in the herd is fertility, to get them in calves so they don't go out of the herd as empty cows, and also to keep down cell count. As if you keep down cell count, cows will actually last in the herd. So pull off your Co-op report. The top half of it will tell you what your production is. And the second half of it then is very useful for the actual breeding season, right? Because the first thing here, the average EBI of the Bandon average is 106. So I mean, which is close, so I mean, to where we are nationally at the moment. So we need to get that up to at least 140. But the top 10% are at 154. The other thing to look at here then is the 6-week calving rate, as we need to get the high 6-week calving rate for grass. And if we look at Bandon here, they're at 64. So I mean, so we need to get that up to 78. The other thing here that's quite interesting, it'll tell you your percentage replacements by AI. I know some of you may have AI replacements and not recording the sire, which is really worthwhile to record the sire, because even for the technicians coming out to avoid inbreeding, and also to allow you, I mean, to select the best cows, your best heifers. And then there's just 70% of the heifers here in Bandon calving between 22 and 26 months, right? And from the point of view of carbon, to get that efficiency, that's where we need to go. So pull out your Co-op report, have a look at where are you from the point of view of production, right? SEC, that's a different day's work. Your calving interval, the average calving interval in Bandon is 387. We have to try and get that down close to 365, right? Up the 6-week calving rate, right? And up the percentage of heifers that's calving between 22 and 26 months, right? And that is a great start. Next great start is going to your EBI scorecard. It's a new scorecard that ICBF brought out this year, and it's very, very visual, because what it'll tell you is, where are you with the herd EBI? Are you 5-star? And just look at the two main ones, the milk subindex and the fertility subindex. Now, if you're concerned about the size of the cow, so I mean, you could look at the maintenance. And the other one that is going to be more important going forward is the health subindex. As if we want all the cows, we are going to have more health issues. It's like ourselves, if we live longer, we are going to have more health issues, and the same with cows, right? So where are you in the EBI scorecard? And that'll help you with what bulls to select. And the other piece of it then will help you how do you actually breed. Now, if your kilos of milk solids is low, first thing you look at here is the genetics. Have they the potential to improve it? But the other big thing, to lift production in herds, you need herd maturity. As you see yourself at the moment, in your milking the cows there in the morning and evening, the 3rd and 4th lactation cows are just belting out the milk. I mean, and 3rd and 4th lactation cows will have somewhere between 20 and 29% more milk than the first calvers. Right? I know if you're expanding, fair enough, it's hard to keep the herd maturity. But if you hadn't expanding, try and have it between 4 to 5.5. If you're an expanding herd, look at your culls that's gone out of the herd. And look at the average age of those culls. That'll tell you a good bit. The other way to drive production is days in milk. Absolutely crucial. Because the cow that calves in February versus the cow that calves in April, and they're all drying off in December, she'll never catch her. So that's why we need a 6-week calving rate. And then, and Gavin, you're doing a nice bit of work there on heifer management, right? Because heifer management is key. And there are two things we need to do with the heifers. Get them calved in the first 4 weeks of the season, because we have a great chance of keeping them early then. But the other thing is, make sure the heifers will hit the ground running when they're going to the herd. So they're hitting close to or more than 78% of the production of the mature cows. As I see plenty herds where the heifers are hitting around the 60% of the mature cows. So you're worried in, do you know what I mean, about the actual heifer rearing, right? So they are the drivers of production. And as soon as you start breeding there, in the middle to the end of April, that 8 to 10 weeks of breeding will determine your genetics coming into the herd in 2 years' time. But they'll really determine the amount of milk you'll actually send to Bandon next year. Because the earlier you can calve them, and the more of the current herd you can keep. If you can keep 82% of the current herd for next year, you will throw away more milk. As the more cows you have to get rid of for 22 that you're milking this year, you'll have to replace them with a heifer, and that heifer will actually be producing less milk. So your milk check from Bandon for 22 is totally dependent on the next 8 weeks. And if you want to improve your genetics, going forward, next 8 weeks are crucial. Now, so what can we do about it? We're talking about the 2021 breeding season, and each of you in your farm at home, you have 3 different groups of animals. You have maiden heifers, you have calf cows, and you have cows yet to calve. They're the 3 groups of animals. So I'll talk and give you a couple of pointers that I think that's worthwhile doing, because we're pre-breeding season now. So pre-breeding season, what can we do with the maiden heifers? Right, we've 2 groups of maiden heifers actually on the farm. We've the ones we're going to bull this year, and we also have the young calves. And the critical thing with these young heifer calves now in siding pens, try and avoid scours and pneumonias. So because heifers are not going to perform to their full potential. So if they'll end up with scour and pneumonia, right? These maiden heifers, the big thing with those is get them out to grass at the moment. Get them out to grass at the moment, right? We need those heifers to last for 5.5 lactations, because it'll take a lactation and a half to pay for themselves, right? So the ones we keep, we need them to last 5.5 lactations. So we need them to calve in February next year. So the most important thing you do at the moment is weigh these heifers. So ring up ICBF there, right? They'll have a weigher out with you, and if he says he'll be out next Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, he'll be there. It's an extra pair of hands. Because if your average weight of the cow is about 600 kilos, you want the heifers hitting around 355 at breeding. So if you weigh the heifers now, you're a good month away at the moment, from breeding. You can pull out the small ones and drive them on. Because it's better to drive on those small ones now rather than to hold them back for 3 weeks and calve them in March. So weigh the heifers now. Absolutely crucial. Get them out to grass. They'll gain over 1 kilo a day out in grass. You will not get that inside in silage. And if there's someone that bit smaller than the others, split them and feed on the smaller ones. Next thing to do with these maiden heifers at the moment is complete their vaccinations. Because we do not want to be vaccinating heifers during the breeding season. So get the vaccinations into them now. If you have surplus heifers and you want to sell some of them, genomic test them. Cost €22 a heifer. But the one thing you're doing is you're guaranteeing that you're going to keep the very best of them. And the other thing then is the heifers you're selling, you can be sure of the actual size of them. So if you're telling her, Donna, they're out of bull A, they're out of bull A. Then select the sires for them to put them in this year. And if you're buying a stock bull, make sure he's easy calving. And we'll come into it now later on. As ICBF this year and last year, I was the first year, maybe it was the year before, they bought out for stock bulls, low risk, medium risk, and high risk for maiden heifers. So if you're buying a bull for maiden heifers, make sure it's low risk. Because the worst thing we see in maiden heifers is difficult calvings. They just will not reach their potential. And talking to sheriff vets out there, they are doing cesareans in maiden heifers. So especially out of stock bulls, right? And then plan the breeding for the heifers. Where are they? So will I synchronize them? What heat detection aids will I do? When will I scan them? And how will I monitor the stock bull? So the big thing with the maidens, weigh them at the moment. Get your vaccinations complete. If you have surplus ones, get them genomically tested so the results are back by the time you get to sell them. Select the sire for him now. And if you want to select the stock bull to clean up, make sure he's easy calving, and then plan for the breeding season. Right? They're the easy calving panel we have at the moment. And basically what you can see is more calvings are going to come in. They're rock solid with the number of calvings. There's some bulls there up to 12 and 18,000 calvings. Right? And what we like is to have at least 1,200 calvings. In all the bulls, right? And all these bulls are actually low risk for heifers, right? And they have quite high reliability of calving. The majority will be over 85. And that's the most important thing for maidens. And if you're going out buying a stock bull to clean up, get his tag number, put him in the ICBF animal search and make sure he's low risk for maiden heifers. Now, so that's our first group of heifers done, our first group of animals in the farm, the maiden heifers. The second group now I'll go on to the calved cows, right? Now, and the big thing with the calved cows, we're a month away from breeding. Some of these cows are calved since the end of January, early February. Do you know what I mean? So they're calved a good, do you know what I mean, 8 or 10 weeks. And some of them are only calved a week or so. So the most important thing for cows at the moment is to maintain body condition score in those calved cows, right? And how do we maintain body condition score? Dermot and Gavin were telling me there that you're out of grass day and night now, so I'll slip that slide and I'll go to the one out of grass full time. So if you're out of grass full time and if you have enough grass, the most important thing is to make sure those cows are fully fed. So if those cows are averaging 26 litres and they're getting in 14 kilos of grass, so I mean 3.5 kilos of solids will do. But if they're only getting in 12 kilos of grass, you need 6 kilos. So the most important thing is what yield are the cows doing? It's all about input and output, right? And then how much grass is actually going into the cows. And if the bulk tank is kind of settled down now, in the sense that you aren't adding too much more cows to it because they're slowed down a bit in calving, and you can have a stab at how much milk you're taking out of it, watch the volume in the tank and watch the protein percent. As if you watch the volume in the tank and watch the protein percent, they are the two best indicators you'll ever get of the actual energy in the cow's diet. So the key thing for these cows that are calved is get enough energy into them and avoid them using BCS between here and the breeding season. Right, now, the next group of cows I go into is cows that have yet to calve, right? Because we're the middle of March now, and these cows that have yet to calve, the more of these we can keep in the herd, the better. Because if we can't keep them in the herd for next year, we'll have to replace them with a heifer, which is a cost, and also they will not have, the heifer will not have as much milk as the cow. So cows yet to calve, the big thing with them is watch the body condition score. We do not want to get them over fat. So definitely restrict them. And if all your cows are out by day and night, as Dermot and Gavin says, it's very easy to restrict cows if you have tons of barrier space. I mean, just give them straw, give them some with silage. Much harder to restrict them when you're restricted in barrier space. However, within 10 days of the cow calving, stop restricting her, give her ad lib, and it's very worthwhile in the last week of 10 days before calving, introduce concentrates. So I mean to the cows to get a room and adjust to the actual concentrates. Then the other big thing is avoid milk fever, because milk fever retains afterbirth, dirty uteruses, they all go together. And if we take these late calving cows that calve down in that bit of heavy body condition, they're much more prone to actually to milk fever. So make sure the minerals are going into them, right? And then if you have a very mature cow that calves down and she's a suspect for actual milk fever, those calcium boluses at calving and 24 or 48 hours later are very, very useful for those cows. Also, if you have some thick fat cows calving down, well, regardless what you do, you're always going to have one or two of them. The ones that are factory fit practically and calving down, a Keckstone bolus really helps those cows after calving. It helps with the fatty liver, I mean LDAs and various other issues. So the big thing with the cows that are yet to calve, restrict them until 10 days pre-calving, then give them ad lib and introduce some concentrates. Avoid milk fever by keeping the minerals into them and making sure they're getting low K silage. So I mean, if you have cows suspect, so I mean, that they had milk fever before, or so I mean, they're your big mature cow, so I mean, with a lot of milk, your calcium bolus. And if you have a cow fit for the factory, so I mean, get the old Keckstone bolus into it. Now, so if we take those cows that calve in late March, April, and also cows with issues that are already calved, and cows with issues could be cows that are thin, right? Cows that had difficult calvings, cows that left displaced abymasiums, lame cows and so forth. There are 5 things you can really do with those cows to try and make sure they actually stay in the herd for next year. The first thing is the body condition score and nutrition, right? And when you're about 4 weeks out from the breeding season, go through the cows, and any cows that's calved since late January, February, that are thin, or any first calvers that are very thin, put them on once a day. works very well. Keep up the input, but you're reducing the output. Very simple thing to do. And as soon as they come bulling, you can put them on twice a day. Make sure they're fully fed. Go back to the graph I had earlier. It's all about matching input and output. Once a day, milking works very well. And then at the very start, if you've done a pre-breeding heat check, at the very start of the breeding season, get out your vet to examine the usual suspects. These are the late calvers, the cows that kept the afterbirths, the cows that had displaced abermazums, the cows that had E. coli, the cows that had milk fever. I mean, you vet will check them. Some of them may need Metricure. And once they're calved 35 days, I would synchronize them. Because these cows with issues and these late calvers, if you synchronize them in fixed time EI, you've got a service into them, right? And because you have a race against time with these cows. You can't give them time, because give them time, give them a chance of getting out of the herd. We want to work with them to actually keep them in the herd. And it's worth working with these cows to keep them in the herd. However, I'd only work with the ones that I want to keep in the herd. Because there's no point in putting a cow in once a day milking if you're going to get rid of her at the end of the year because she was always lame or she has a high cell count or you don't want her. But for the cows you want to keep, work with them and work with those late calvers. It'll really pay you because you'll keep them in the herd. Now, the other bit there I'll just touch on is sex semen. There's good interest in sex semen at the moment. The big thing is your herd suitable? And that you present suitable cows or heifers. So the big thing is try and get herds of known high fertility, that you have a high 6-week calving rate and if you have a good fertility subindex. Because what you want to do with sex semen is give yourself every chance of success. Work with the cows that are calved the longest 60 to 90 days. Work with the younger cows, 1 to 4th lactation. Work with the cows that are in good body condition score. Work with the cows that had no calving issues, no milk fever issues, retained afterbirth and so forth. If you're going in heifers, make sure they're up to the target weight. Accurate heat detection. And synchronization, I think, has a great role to play on sex semen, because with synchronization, what it does is it gives you 2 services in the 1 3-week period, right? So it reduces the impact of ending up with a lower conception rate with sex semen. But the other thing it does with it, it gives you more precise timing of AI, because you get best results with synchronization and sex semen if you're inseminating cows or heifers 14 to 20 hours after being on heat, and only use sex semen in the first 3 weeks of the breeding season. Right, and the other thing is be smart with sex semen. We'll say is if you want a couple of cows picked out for it, and your technicians coming into your yard every day at 9 o'clock. And if a cow is very fresh bulling, give her conventional. But the cows you know they were definitely in heat and going off, give them sexed. If you've synchronized a bunch of heifers, right, and the weather is good, the sun is shining, the heifers are flying, massive response to synchronization, go for it. However, if we get really bad weather, really cold weather, heifers humped, very poor response to synchronization, let the sex semen in the pot and go conventional. So be flexible, be smart about it. The big advantage, it reduces the dairy bought male calves, but the disadvantage is the variability of it, higher cost, lower genetic merit of animals, and a limited number of suitable herds. Now, this was the trial that was conducted in 2009 with over 8,000 cows by Moorpark. And what you can basically see there is the 18 best herds. The relative conception rate was 90%. The third herds where it didn't perform as well was 64. But the variation in the conventional semen, it varied from 53% up to 70%, 17% variation in ordinary semen. But if you look at the sex semen, there was a 36% variation. So this is the issue, is the variation in it. So how you get over that is using multiple sires. So don't bank in one sire, use multiple sires. Use it in the first 3 weeks and use it in conjunction with a good synchronization program. So you will use very little time. But most fellas like to try a little bit of it and see how they get on. Now, We'll hit into the breeding season now, and I suppose when you're about 3 weeks out for the breeding season, so I mean, if you get a bit of help there on a Saturday and so forth, it's really worthwhile putting on the tail paint. And the most important thing before you put on tail paint is clip the rumps. As if you clip that old coat of hair out of the rumps and put on the tail paint, like this man has done a nice tidy job here in the parlour, right? The cows, the paint will come off completely. The cows will be skinned. So you will not end up with layers of paint. Well, if there's too much hair there and you paint them, the paint will really get stuck into the hair and it's very difficult to get the tail paint off. And if you're topping up tail paint twice a week, by the time you hit the third or the fourth week, there's a massive layer of paint there. You know what I mean? It's very hard to shift. The other thing that works fantastic is a vasectomized bull. He's absolutely super. He'll work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no PAYE, no PRSI, no complaints. Superman, you know. So if you haven't got a vasectomized bull, definitely get him. There's definitely room in every farm for one, if not two, if not three, if not four, right? So definitely keep the strongest 2 or 3 bull calves you have for this year, get them vasectomized in the autumn before they go in, so they'll do no harm across the winter. And the big thing with a vasectomized bull is fitting with a chin ball. So I mean, this chin ball is the best, right? And padding behind the ears. You could pad the noseband as well, either with elastoplast, or the other thing, you could thread the leather through 18 inches of a volume washer. So I mean, that's broken. But the big thing is, vasectomized bulls are super, as you can let them off with the heifers for the first 3 to 4 weeks, when there's a lot of activity in the cows, and then bring them back to the cows. And the one thing we've seen, as herds get larger, it's harder and harder to keep stock bulls sound in them. Well, if you have vasectomized bulls in there, I mean, they're cheaper. So I mean, and just get a good athletic Jersey cross. So I mean, dairy bull, they're superb for heat detection. The big thing with the chin ball paint is it's a very heavy paint. You can see there, it's a very heavy oil-based paint, right? And just give them that drum a couple of shakes, you will not get even distribution. So throw it into a bucket of warm water when you're starting off the season. So I mean, and get a little bit of rod iron, I mean, to really, really stir it up fierce well. And just keep that chin ball topped up, and the bull will actually do the rest of it. And the bull will actually mark the top of the back, I mean, where the cows are bulling. Now, for heifers, tail paint doesn't work as well. Vasectomized bull works superb. But the other thing we find that really works well for heifers is scratch cards. They come in rolls of 100, right? And the trick with them is spray the heifer, spray the card, and wait till the card gets tacky like the tube of a bike, and then put it on and secure it, right? And they're absolutely fantastic, because they're just like the lotto cards. So you can see here, when the heifer is bulling, it's completely red. There's an awful lot of activity. The red is nearly rubbed off. It's down to white. So I mean, the sides of it is cuddled. So I mean, and they come in different colors, but they're super for maiden heifers outside, not for inside. For heifers inside, what works well is crayons, right? And if you're using sex semen, you could have a belt and braces job, have scratch cards, and put crayons on behind them. Now, if any of you are doing up a yard, definitely consider putting in a batch crush, because they're quite cheap to put in, right? And if you're in a herring-born parlour, cows go into them very easy. They're absolutely super for tail painting. They're super for vaccination. They're super for dosing, TB testing, for handling large groups of cows and doing the jobs. So I mean, that we keep putting off and putting off and putting off until we get that bit of help. So I mean, but they're absolutely super. So definitely consider one of those batch crushes if you're doing something. There's sensor technology out there now in drafting systems. So I mean, and they are working well. I mean, if you're short the labour, do you know what I mean? They are actually working well. They're also quite good as well for picking up the health. But the important thing is decide what method of heat detection for the cows, what method of heat detection for the heifers. Am I changing it after 3 weeks? So I mean, so have a plan. Now, synchronization programs for heifers, so I mean, they work extremely well, right? The top one here is the cheapest one. Do you know what I mean? For the first 6 to 7 days, you watch them in heat, and you should have a third of them picked up. And if you haven't a third of them picked up, you ask yourself the question, why? So I mean, is it so they hadn't cycling their prepubertal? Did I miss them? Or God forbid, a dying calf, right? So if you're having to turd them bred in the first week, sort out why before you come in with actually shot of prostaglandin. And come in there with your shot of prostaglandin day 6, day 7, day 8, or day 9. But the important thing is make sure you're around 48, 72 hours later, as the majority will be in bulling. So that system works well. It costs a $5 a heifer. You get all your heifers bred in about 12 days. And what happens then is your repeats are around close together. The one thing on this, be very careful if you're letting off a bull with the heifers straight after a synchronization. Because what you don't want is a young virgin bull that has never mated before and all these heifers coming at him. Do you know what I mean? You'll easily use your actually 3 weeks. Right, so that's the synchronization of the heifers. That's the synchronization of the cows. Method that works exceptionally well. So I mean, it'll be there in the brochures, it'll be in our catalogues. So I mean, it costs about €25 a cow. Definitely use it for the late calvers. So I've used that pre-breeding, just at the very start of the season, cows calf 35 days not bred. 3 weeks into the season, I'd use it. Cows calf 35 days not bred, and 6 weeks in. So 3 times a year, I'd call out your vet and I would synchronize those cows, and you're getting a service into them, and it really increases the chance of retaining those cows in the herd. I'll just quickly go through the beef sires, right? These are exclusively selected for the dairy herd. Quality calves with your security of calving, shot gestation, beef value maximized. So I mean, ICBF brought out the dairy beef index there. And what you basically do is decide what breed you're actually going to use. So if you look here for maiden heifers, and I was explaining to you earlier about in the maiden heifers, they give you the percentage calving and whether they're low risk or high risk. And if you look here, there are 2 bulls here, Pat and Jamie, 2 very useful bulls. They're the same as KYA for calving, but what they have is much higher a carcass than actually KYA. But the bull here at the top, he's a rare gem, Mateo. He's easy born, right? 6.4% with 98% reliability. He's exceptional gestation, -4 days, right? And with a carcass of 6.1 kilos. It's an absolute, really good combination for actually Angus and maiden heifers. He's real curve bender. For cows then, what we try and do with cows is we try and hit 10 kilo carcass in cows, right? And so you can see here, the first bull there, Fargal, so I mean, he's 13 kilos of carcass. You can use him in second calvers up. The bull underneath him, Master, so I mean, he's up a little bit in calving. I just use him in cows, not in second calvers. So I mean, use him in cows, right? And then Marvick, he's that little bit lighter in carcass, but he's gaining in gestation. So where you could use him is at the end of the season. As the big thing in dairy, what we need to do is end up with a beef calf that when the beef guy buys it, he can actually make money out of it, right? And that's absolutely crucial. And when you look at those bulls there, you aren't compromising calving is, you're not compromising gestation length, and you end up with carcass. Then if you look at the Herefords, and this panel of Herefords we have are the shortest gestation that's out there. They're all negative, which is very good for Herefords, right? Calving is quite easy, so I mean, and profile there is a super bull. So I mean, he's a pole bull, he's 9 kilos of carcass, 3.4 for calving, -2 days in gestation, and he's poled. He's the highest DBI Hereford available. You cannot go wrong with him. He's ticking all the boxes. Now, then if you look at Aubrac, a very useful breed for actually beef and dairy. What they're actually like is a limousine crossed in Angus with all the benefits of both. However, I wouldn't use them if I was bringing the calves to the mat because you won't get the value for them. So either have an arrangement made with a guy that's buying them off of you continually, or if you're finishing them yourself. But that Magnificent there is a very good bull. But look at the carcass there, like you're getting up to 22 kilos of carcass and a 4.2 calving. Then there's Limousine and Belgian Blue, so I mean, for the more mature cows. So I mean, you need that little bit more care there. But some guys, I mean, just like that. But again, you're up under 20 kilos of carcass. Stock bulls, if you're buying stock bulls, try and buy them in time. And often I think the stock bull is like poor old Paul Gallivan in the Munster final. So I mean, there's no one there to protect them. They're left to their own devices. And So I mean, we really need to start protecting our stock bulls, you know. So bull power is crucial, and make sure you've established how many empty cows you've left before you let off the stock bull. And one thing we're seeing, herds that continue AI for about 10 to 14 days after letting out the stock bull, it gives the bull time to adjust, and you also avoid that lull in calving, which a lot of you are hitting that lull now if you haven't hit it already. And that's at the time when AI stops and the bull goes out. So try and avoid that lull. Make sure he's easy calving. There's nothing worse. What will reduce fertility in a dairy herd is calving difficulty. Purchase the bull in advance so you can vaccinate whatever you're vaccinating for. Gets over his nutritional stress. Foot bat him to make sure you're not putting in Martellara. So I mean, and make sure he can mate before you let him off with females. Because bulls actually, they innately do not know how to mate. They have to learn themselves how to mate. And as soon as the bull gets lame or injured, on the bench. Andrew and Kevin will probably go through this, but we've simplified it in panels. If you use these panels of bulls, so I mean, that's the target for 500-600 kilos of milk solids. That's for the super grazers, where guys want a smaller cow, 500 kilo cow with maintenance. And back to the dairy herd owner. At the end of the day, what you want is a good work-life balance, profit, protect, so I mean, your asset and reduce time per cow. And the next 8 weeks will really set you up for 21 and genetic-wise for a longer time. So what I'd say to you, do out a plan. What's your mating start date? Get out your vet, pre-breeding, 3 weeks in, 6 weeks in, 9 weeks in. Put those dates in the calendar and just drive it accordingly. So I thank you, and I hopefully you found it useful.
Thanks very much, Doreen. We'll take a couple of questions there if anybody has it there in the chat, and the questions, answers. Just a quick one, Doreen, on the once-a-day milking. I suppose we need to be careful with cows at high cell count or high-yielding cows, and just to make a comment on how long is enough for once-a-day milking. Would you leave them for a month, or would you wait till they're serving the first 3 weeks? Or
the first thing I'd only put the very thin cows on the once-a-day milking, do you know what I mean? And I'd put late calvers on it. If cows are still in by night, I'd milk them at night. So I mean, so they're going into the cubicles with empty bags. Wouldn't milk them in the morning, so if they're going to leak, they're going to leak out in pasture. And I'd let them on it until such time as they're actually served.
Perfect. There's a few more questions coming in here. Just you might make a comment on timing of AI.
Okay, timing of AI. The best time to inseminate a cow is when she's standing, and up to 12 hours later, right? For sex semen, so I mean, it's at the end, in the heat, if you possibly can, 14 to 20 hours after the start of the heat. If the technician is coming into your yard every morning at 9 o'clock, inseminate every cow up to that time, so I mean, you've actually seen them.
Another few questions coming in here, Doreen. What does Doreen think of using sire advice to choose your AI bulls?
Great. Sire advice is I mean, it's good. I mean, it works. The one thing is that, and it completely avoids inbreeding, right? Or if you want it simplified, you could have the Gene Ireland panels, I mean, which is really high EBI, or select one of our panels and let the technician work the handheld to avoid inbreeding as well.
Another question coming in here. What ratio of teaser bull to cows should you have?
Teaser bull, I wouldn't put him with the cows for the first 3 to 4 weeks, because if you have 100 cows, so I mean, if you have 100 cows, you'll have 5 a day coming in the first 3 weeks. So I mean, they'll be skint, right? So the bull will only get hurt at that. So I'd wait until 4 or 5 weeks in, so I mean, for him. And one second season bull, so I mean, easily handle 100 cows.
Once a day or twice a day for the AI man? Is there any benefit to twice a day, Doreen?
No. If you have once a day and you're drafting the cows, so I mean, up until the time technicians coming in, so I mean, no issue whatsoever. You get quite high conception rates, and it reduces labour as well.
Just a comment there as well. There's another question coming in about, is there any other heat detection aids for heifers that there was just a comment made that heifers leaking each in scratch cards rendering them useless. Same for tail paint. The farmer did show that. So is there any other heat detection aids you could use for heifers?
Heifers, insecticide bull is superb. A combination of scratch cards and crayons, so I mean, works really well. They're about the two best ones, really, you know.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
That's perfect. Look, we'll take a few more questions at the end there, and we'll open the floor to questions at the end after Kevin and Andrew's presentation. So I'll hand over to Kevin Downing and Andrew Comrie from ICBF.
Thanks very much, Gavin. So Kevin, you'll maybe just share the slides. I have a few slides at the start here, Gavin, just in terms of some background and EBA trends for the co-op and that, and then Kevin's going to pick up some of the more practical stuff around genetic gain. So Kevin, yeah.
Okay, 1 second there now. Share screen.
If we're stuck, Doreen, you'll be able to show them.
God help us.
How's that look? Are we on full screen or what?
They are. We're right at the very end, Kevin.
No.
We're onto the summary slide, so.
I better no, stop
Yeah,
sharing.
we are right.
Go to the very start. Always go again.
Okay. Yep.
You're full screen now, Kevin. First slide up.
Perfect.
Okay, look, thanks very much. Okay, Kevin, and thanks very much for inviting us to talk to the seminar there this evening. So Kevin and I are going to cover increasing genetic gain in the dairy herd. Maybe just next slide, Kevin. I suppose, first of all, I mean, just to put it in context in terms of what EBA has delivered at the national level, and this is looking at the EBA trends based on year of first calving. So if you look at the heifers that calved in there in 2020, year just gone past, they were calving in with an EBA of just over 130 in EBA terms. And if you look at that blue line, you can see that it has really tracked very, very steady increases in EBA gain for about 12-15 years, going back to when many of the participants on the call will remember tonight, you know, in terms of going back to the early 2000s, when really we weren't making any gain in terms of overall profitability. You know, the gains that we were getting in milk solids were largely being eroded by disimprovement in female fertility. And obviously the EBA came in then in the early 2000s. And like with any new index, it took a few years to get going, but certainly by 2005, so that's the heifers calving in there, you'll see in 2007 really was the first year we started to get a significant lift, and that has accelerated on with Gene Ireland and genomics. And if we look at the rate of gain that we're currently achieving in our first calving heifers year on year, it's about €11 per year. And if you sum that gain up over the period of time that we're going back over those 12-15 years, it's worth €284 per lactation. It's equivalent to 5 cents per litre. So that's the heifer you calved in last year. She's calving in her second calf now. But it's the profitability of that heifer in our lifetime compared to the one that you would have calved back in, you know, in the sort of the mid-2000s. And look, you know, that sounds like a big figure, but I think you'll also would acknowledge a lot of people remember the cow that they had 10 or 15 years ago, and certainly would acknowledge that the cow they have now is certainly much more profitable and more sustainable, and you know, is certainly putting us in a solid basis in terms of going forward into the future. So the next, and Doreen has referenced just, you know, some of these figures here, just looking at some of the trends for the co-op over the last 5 years. And herd owners or participants in the seminar tonight would have got their 5-year trend reports there a number of weeks ago. So this is the exact same data, but obviously summed up for all of the herds in the co-op. and just giving you a sense of the steady gain that the co-op have been making relative to the national average. In for example, the average EBA of cows in the co-op now, in terms of the co-op herds, is coming in at 107. You'll see that in terms of kilograms of milk solids per cow, it's gone up from 375 in 2016 when quotas were removed to for the year just gone past 425 kilos. So really good steady performance increase in terms of milk solids per cow. And another one that I know is of interest here to the co-op, because there's been a particular focus on it, is the whole area of 2-year-old calving, 2-year calving. And you can see that now that is getting up to 72% in line with the national average figure as well. So again, just highlighting that there has been very sustained progress and improvement within the herds across the co-op over the course of the last number of years. So the next slide. So this is then when we start to talk about the opportunity that EBA can bring to members in the co-op, and this is then an analysis of the co-op data, the 220 herds that have 10 or more cows with EBA data, and you can see the average EBA of those cows. There's 99 cows on average. The average herd size, the average EBA 105, delivering 433 kilograms of milk solids there in 2020. Somatic cell count at 167, an average lactation of 3.6. 71% hit in the 22 to 26 months, 6-week calving rate at 65%, and 386 days calving interval. That's the average performance. But if we break down then those 220 herds and look at the top 20% in the co-op in terms of EBA, so these are the 44 herds that are ranked highest in EBA. And the average EBA of those herds, based on their co-op performance data, is 156 euros. So that's nicely above the co-op average. It's nicely above the national average. And it's interesting then to look at, well, how are these herds performing relative to other herds in the co-op? And you can see that straight away, they're achieving 460 kilos of milk solids per cow. They have lower somatic cell count. They have a slightly younger herd, but they're achieving 93% of their heifers are calving at the target of 2 years of age, and they have a 6-week calving rate of 78%. That was the sort of figures that Doreen was talking about, our targets for the future, and a calving interval of 373 days. And that compares with, if you compare that with the bottom 20% of herds, they're coming in, that's 44 herds in the co-op with an average EBA of 43 euros. And you can see that the difference in milk solids there, well, first of all, the difference in EBA is 114 euros. And when you express that in profit per lactation, because bear in mind the EBA is what the cow passes on to the calf. So it's a half figure, and the other half in the calf is coming from the bull. So the cow has 2 sets of those genes. So the difference in profitability is 228 euros per lactation between those high herds and those low herds. And across 100 cows, well, that's 23,000 euros. It's 4 cents per litre to bring it back in real profit terms. And if you look at then how is that coming about, because some people again might say, geez, that sounds like a big figure. Is it credible? Well, these high EBA herds are delivering another 75 kilos of milk solids. They're delivering milk with a lower somatic cell count. They're largely the same in terms of average age, but they're certainly in terms of the target 22 to 26 months, 93% compared to 44%. So they're carrying way fewer heifers. 6-week calving rate of 78% versus 53%, and an average calving interval difference there of 32 days. So I suppose it's really just to highlight the point that, EBA really is delivering, and certainly it's delivering here within this context, within the Bandon Co-op region. Just to try and understand, well, okay, looking at these herds again, and what are the key characteristics of these high EBA herds relative to the average or relative to the bottom EBA herds? And a couple of points are really relevant from this table. The first one is that, you know, if you look at the 5-year trend reports, and every one of the participants on the call will have access to that 5-year trend report, you know, have a look at it and see where your current EBA is out of your herd, and you can track it back then over the course of the last 5 years. The top 20% of herds, you can see their current EBA is 157. If you go back to 2016, the EBA, the herds, those herds was 110. So they're making a gain per year of €11.60. It's faster than the co-op average, and it's much faster than the bottom 20% of herds, even though, if you think about it, it's more difficult for the high EBA herds to make fast gain because they're coming from a higher base. A lower herd, in theory, should be able to make a faster level of gain, but they're not making a faster level of gain. And there's a number of reasons for that. The first one, and this is the crucial one, the top 20% herds, 90% of the females on those farms, cows and young stock, are by AI bred. That compares to 30% for the bottom 20% of herds. So a huge difference there in level of AI usage. And that's the first thing that will ultimately drive, and the key thing that will ultimately drive genetic improvement in your herd is your preparedness or otherwise to use AI and use teams of bulls and sire advice and tools like that. And Kevin McCollough will talk about that next. But the other one that's interesting here is that, okay, even the high EBA herd are using some level of stock bulls, whether it's they're not getting a lot of cows, but 10% of the females in these farms are not by AI. But the EBA of the bulls they're using, you can see on these farms, the average EBA of these bulls is €201. And that compares with the average EBA of bulls on the bottom 20% of herds is €122. So it's probably safe to say that of the 200 herds or 220 herds in the co-op, there's quite a lot of dairy stock bulls, so particularly in the bottom 20% group. And I'd encourage you to go and just check the EBA out on those stock bulls. And if you're not inclined to use as much AI as we'd like, and you prefer for whatever reason to use some level of stock bull, I'd certainly encourage you. You really need to be using high EBA stock bulls, and certainly more than one, have a few. And the other thing that's interesting in these herds is that, you know, one might think that maybe the high EBA herds, maybe they're more bought in, they're newer herds, but that's not necessarily the case. The average number of bought in animals in the co-op herds is on average 14%. So if you look at the number of cows, for every 100 cows, 14 have been bought in, either as a calved in animal or a young animal to calve in. So most of the gain really is coming from, and it's been primarily driven by high usage of AI. So look, a key question then from an ICBS standpoint, and the objective of obviously this seminar is, well, you know, how can we help you increase the rate of gain in EBA if you're herd? There's a lot of money at stake. We talked about the 23,000 euros, the 4 cents per litre opportunity. There's the carbon and climate benefits that Doreen talked about earlier. And at this stage, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Kevin Downing, and he'll take you through some of the key activities that you can engage on over the next number of weeks to help drive that. Over to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. So look, just following on from what Andrew's outlined already, and you clearly saw the differences within the top herds and the lower herds in terms of EBI, and what can you do to increase genetic gain within your own herd? And look, as been outlined already, you know, high EBI cows deliver more profit per lactation. And, you know, all the research work has shown that for every €1 increase in EBI, there's a €2 increase in extra profitability within the herd. And I suppose if we look at, well, what is one of the key drivers of that extra profit? And it's delivery of more milk solids, and really getting a fertile herd is one of the key drivers of that. Having cows that calve every year with a very high 6-week calving rate, having a lower replacement rate, and having those heifers calving in at 2 years of age, which has been already mentioned. You know, that will help you achieve a mean herd calving date around mid-February. And if you look at the table there, you'll see that the average figures nationally, while they have improved year on year, they're still a long ways off where they need to be. And you can clearly see there we're at 387 days calving interval, and we need to be down at the 365 figure. And similarly for the other metrics there, you can see there's a considerable road to be made up yet to achieve those targets. So really fertility has to be one of the key focuses that we maintain over the coming years to improve our profit on farm. And look, it's widely acknowledged that a fertility sub-index of 100 is required to achieve those industry targets. So I think, you know, if you look at your own EBI report, you'll see, you know, well, how far am I away from that target? So what plans do you need to put in place to improve your genetic gain? And the first step is to identify your herd strengths and also the weaknesses within your herd, and also to set a breeding goal. And once you've set that goal, try and stick to that for a number of years. Don't be chopping and changing from year to year. Try and have that goal and keep to it for, you know, at least 5 years, because breeding is a slow game. It doesn't happen overnight. So you need to stick to that goal as well. Select a team of high EBI bulls when you're breeding your dairy herd replacements. So again, picking teams of bulls and high EBI. Using the ICBF sire advice then is the best tool to help manage your breeding program and to achieve the best matings. Using high EBI females to breed your replacements. So target your highest EBI females to breed from. And then also your lower EBI animals, they're the ones that maybe you could consider using a beef straw on, and using the dairy beef index to select those sires. And I know Doreen has outlined already some of the panels that they have within Munster to achieve with high dairy beef index. So the first one there is identify your strengths and weaknesses. And again, we would have sent out this scorecard to every herd in the country there a number of weeks back. And that really gives you a picture of where your own herd is at and how that compares with the national average and where you are in terms of your star rating. So clearly, you know, if you're low on stars, like 1 or 2 stars, they're the areas that you need to focus in on within your own herd. So that scorecard is available on our website in the EBI profile or on the EBI report. So in this particular example, this herd is particularly low in fertility and also in maintenance. So there are 2 areas that this herd might need to put extra focus and extra emphasis when selecting bulls this breeding season. You should also look at your co-op performance report, which Doreen showed there earlier, which actually gives you a picture of how you're performing on the ground. Because you can have good genetics and maybe not necessarily be achieving those genetics from an output perspective. And similarly, you might have poor genetics and actually your management is masking some of those poor genetics. So have a look at the co-op performance report. Also look at the calving report, because that's going to give you a really good picture of how you are in terms of fertility performance at farm level. And combining all those 3 reports will really identify, well, what areas are you strong and what areas do you need to improve. And only then will you be able to select the bulls that will help improve the genetics and the weaknesses within your herd. So then how do you go about selecting a team of bulls? And the first thing we would say is that you need to use a large team of bulls. And the guidelines there are outlined on the table there on the left-hand side. So a typical 100 to 150 cow herd needs to be using a minimum of 8 bulls as part of their team, and also using those equally across your herd. And the reason for using larger teams is to try and spread the risk of any fluctuations there might be in evaluation terms in future years, but also maybe in terms of male fertility, that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket and you're spreading your risk. So again, try and adhere to those, and remember they're the minimum that you should be trying to achieve. And again, you know, certainly there should be no, you know, in terms of maximum, you know, having bull teams of 15, 16, 17 bulls, we regularly see herds that are using teams that size. Just on the bottom left-hand side there is an example of where you should be trying to aim for in terms of your overall bull teams. So in terms of EBI, having a bull team over 250 EBI. And within that, the fertility sub-index should be well above 100. And we would say push towards 120 for fertility. Also in terms of milk, having a bull team around 80 euro. And similarly in the health sub-index, try to achieve 5 euro as part of your team. But then within that team, you don't want to have every bull the same, and you can have some bulls that are very strong in fertility and not so hot in milk, and vice versa. But on the left-hand side there, I'd say we would argue that you shouldn't have to go below any of those thresholds. 200 in terms of EBI, 80 in terms of fertility, 50 in terms of milk, and there's no need to be using negative bulls in health either. There's lots of bulls on the list to choose from, and if you adhere to those guidelines, you won't go too far wrong. And the final point there again is, as well as using high EBI bulls, use those bulls equally across the herd. Don't pick a team of 10 bulls and then put a big emphasis on 2 of them and use 2 at 50% across the herd. Try and not use more than 15% of any one mating in your herd. So that will really spread the risk as well by equal usage. So where do you go about finding these high EBI bulls? Well, look, I'm sure a lot of you will have got catalogs from the eye companies that lists all their bulls. What we have on the ICBF website is the active bull list, and that has bulls, all the active bulls available in the country from all the eye companies. And you'll see there, it's highlighted there. If you click on that, that will bring you into all the bulls, the lists of bulls that we have, both in terms of dairy and also beef. So you'll see you've got the EBI, the dairy beef index for beef, and also some of the standalone traits for, TB and liver fluke. And we have bulls that you can pick that are more resistant to TB and liver fluke as well. And they're listed there as well. So focusing on the EBI index, so click on that, and that will list all the bulls that are available, as I said, nationally. And each of those columns that you see across the top, you can sort and filter in all those columns to help narrow down the list of bulls that you want to pick from to suit your herd. By clicking on the AI code, you'll also get all the information that is available on that bull, from the milk performance, fertility, previous evaluations. It's all there at one click of the mouse. So that's the active bull list. But I suppose really, if you're serious about achieving the best genetic gain and having your best matings, you need to be looking at the Herd Plus Sire Advice program. And that's available under the applications window once you log into the ICBF website. And click on the Sire Advice button there. And once you have that done, you'll be presented with the following screen, which has the scorecard of where your own performance is at. And then you'll be presented with either manually entering the bulls or using the Sire Advice Plus. So there are 2 versions. So if you have the bulls already selected from a catalogue or whatever, you can just literally go to the manual enter bulls. But we would strongly suggest that farmers use the Sire Advice Plus. Clicking on that will bring you into the screen where you can identify the cows that you wish to breed from. So again, there's your listing of all your cows in the herd. And you should really target the highest EBI animals to breed from, as I said already. So sorting on any of the columns there will bring the top animals to the top of the list. And you can clearly see there, they're the highest EBI animals in the herd, and they're the ones definitely need to get a dairy eye straw. Your lower EBI ones are maybe late calvers, they can get the beef straw or the beef mating. And you can see here as well, you can decide at an early stage, you can go in there today now and select which cows that you want to put a beef mating on, which cows you're going to cull, or which cows are going to get a beef straw, or even if you want to go crossbreeding with some animals, that option is there also on the Sire Advice. On the following screen, then you'll be presented again, similar to the active bull list, all the bulls that are available nationally. And again, on the left-hand side, we've got sliders, and they're a really useful tool to help narrow down the bulls that you want to, or you need to pick from. There's a close-up of it. And again, the figures that are presented there, you'll see milk 60, fertility 78. They're your own herd figures, and you should really be making sure that you're putting putting the sliders above where you are currently. And that's the only really way that you can make sure that you're going to increase your genetic gain for those traits within your herd. So pulling the sliders left and right will actually, increase or decrease the number of bulls that are displayed on the main screen. So a really useful way of doing it. Also, you can pick whichever AI company you want to pick from. You can pick whether you want pedigree bulls or whether they're SRM bulls. So you have lots of choice there in those filters on the left-hand side. And once you've narrowed your list down, you can then go about selecting your team of bulls. And again, using a minimum of 8 or 9 bulls, we would argue, as part of that team. Once you've that done, the program does the rest. It will do all the matings. It will put the best bull on the best cow in your herd to minimize any variation within your herd. So the highest milk bull will go on your lowest milk cow and vice versa. So you get a more balanced team. And as Doreen mentioned earlier, the inbreeding will also be taken care of. So there'll be no inbreeding risk. And those results then, and there's an example of the results page, each cow will have 3 matings. So bull 1, bull 2, and bull 3. And obviously we would advise, if you can, stick to bull 1, but if that's not available in your technician's pot, or if you're DIY, you're after running out of those straws, well then obviously you can use bull 2 or bull 3. Once you save that program or that mating, that will go to your technician's handheld, and we'll also print out breeding charts to any member that's looking for a breeding chart. And that'll be available then when the cows become bulling. You'll know exactly which straw to put in which cow. So the last point I want to make is just using the dairy beef index, and Doreen has probably outlined it a bit already. But these, your lower EBI cows, there's no point putting a high EBI straw on a lot of those low EBI cows, because really you want to focus on your highest EBI to breed your replacements, and your lower ones, they're the ones that you can put the dairy beef straw on or use the beef stock bull on. The dairy beef index, it ranks bulls according to the calving difficulty, but also the beef element as well. So it looks at the calving, it looks at animals that are going to be shorter gestation length, easy calving with less calf mortality. And the beef sub-index element of it, which is the other half of it, it looks at animals that have good carcass weight, good carcass conformation, require less feed, and also have a low carcass fat value. So again, if you're picking bulls from the dairy beef index, they're the ones that you're going to have, you will find easier to sell as well down the line, because they're going to have a good beef merit as well in the calf. So to summarize, again, EBI delivers more profit. I mean, you saw the figures that Andrew clearly outlined there. Huge gains being made by really focusing strongly on EBI. Know your herd strengths and weaknesses. Again, look at that report, pull that report out and see where you're weak, and only then should you choose which bulls to be selecting. The high EBI bulls, again, just keep those figures in mind, over 250 EBI and over 120 fertility. Try and pick teams that are going to achieve that, and again, use them evenly. The sire advice tool, again, invaluable tool, and the vast majority of herds that are pushing on in terms of EBI, they're using this tool year in, year out, and find it extremely useful. And again, target your highest EBI animals to breed the replacements, and your lower ones, they're the ones you could use your dairy beef bulls on. So that's my presentation, just to say that, look, we're available within the Herd Plus office. If any of you want any help in running the sire advice or any questions you have on tonight's presentation, we'd be only too happy to answer them. So with that, I'll hand you back there to your chairman. Thanks, Dermot.
I'll make a couple of comments there, Kevin. Sorry, we'll just open the floor to a couple of questions there as well. Just a question for myself there. Genomics, is genomics working? I suppose is definitely a kind of a topic on farm at the moment. Fellas asking about fluctuating in young genomic bulls. You might just make a comment on using genomic bulls versus daughter proven.
Do you want to take that, Andrew? Or
I don't mind. Yeah, look, I mean, Gavin, we've done a lot of work on that actually over this last while, because you're right, it is a question that has certainly come up. There have been a number of changes to genomics over the last 12 months, and it was a recurring question. Farmers were wondering, was genomics working? I suppose the best way maybe to answer it and to look at it is if we look at the average EBA of heifers calving in each year, and we talked about the EBA of the heifers that calved in last year coming in at 132, and if we look at the daughters of the genomic bulls, on average, generally they were calving in. There's up on 100,000 of them. They were calving in at an EBA of over 150, 152, and that compares with daughters of daughter-proven bulls. So these were whenever the calf was generated, was out of a daughter-proven insemination. Their year on year would be running about 20, 25 EBA points ahead of the daughter-proven bulls. So the progeny of the daughter-proven bulls coming in, and Kevin is just showing the slide because we had it for a few discussion groups. The daughter-proven bulls coming in there, as you can see it, at about 130. That's the yellow line, the grey line then being the progeny of the daughter-proven, the genomic bulls. And I suppose what's really important in that line is that, you know, each year, if you go back to the heifers that calved in 2019 or 18 or 17 and 16, and bear in 16, mind in 16, they calved in 16. So they're calving in their 6th now. They're still, in this case, they're 30 euros ahead of the daughter-proven bulls, the daughters of the genomic bulls born that year. So it gives a lot of confidence that, look, whether you decide to be on the yellow line or the grey line, you're making gain. You know, the two lines are going up. The difference between the grey line, the genomic bulls, and the yellow line is simply one of just the age of the bulls. And on average, you know, there's 3 years of difference between those bulls. That's 3 years of genetic gain. And that's the simple answer to that question. So, you know, the key point we'd make is use your teams of bulls. Invariably, as you pick your teams of bulls, you'll find yourself using these younger genomic bulls because they're higher. But if you're using daughter-proven bulls in there as well that are also ticking the box for you for whatever traits, that's absolutely fine. There's no issue with that whatsoever. I mean, just focus on EBA and what's the particular requirements for your herd.
Perfect. Thanks, Andrew. Couple of questions coming through. Are all the co-ops top 20% herds milk recording? Do you see the milk recording key to improving EBI by being able to select the herd's best cows?
I'll let Dory make a comment in terms of the level of milk recording, but what I will say, invariably the higher EBI herds are absolutely milk recording, and I know that whenever we looked at it in the context of the Bandon co-op herds, you know, they're all milk recording, that top 20% group, you know. The other big benefit that you would see certainly of the milk recording is, and Kevin has alluded to it here, more and more farmers are going to be much more focused around the cows that they select for EBA in terms of breeding their female replacements. So absolutely, milk recording is a key aspect to that. Invariably, also farmers will find themselves being led to more and more towards the younger animals in their herds, but younger animals that are really performing above the average for that heifer group or that group of second calvers. And the only way you really get to find that out is through milk recording.
And I suppose just one other tool that we have there as well is the COZONE work, Andrew, and any herd that isn't recording can use that tool to help identify the poor performance in the herd. And certainly with climate changes, you know, the stocking rate and all that coming down the line, you know, you can't afford to be carrying passengers within the herd. And, you know, having the milk recording figures using the COZONE work will help identify the poor performers and, you know, get rid of those out of the herd then and breed from the highest.
That's perfect. We have a couple more questions coming through here. Question for you, Kevin, on the sire advice. If I'm selecting, I'm only selecting some of the cows for dairy AI bulls for breeding, will the system allow me to select a dairy beef AI bull to upload to my handheld or my technician's handheld also?
So at the moment, no, all you can do is literally select for beef mating. So that's what will go on for the technician. So beef straw, but at the moment, no, we don't have the facility to actually have the beef bull listed on the technician's handheld, but that's something that we'll be working on for the next version, probably for next year. But at least you'll have it that it's a beef mating. And again, you know, not sure how many beef bulls you would have in the panel. But again, as Doreen showed already, I'm sure, Doreen, there's plenty of high DBI bulls that the technician will be carrying in the flask to use.
Another question coming in here. There was a large correction in the fertility subindex of genomic bulls last year. This brought the fertility number to a more reasonable level. Again, this year we see genomic bulls with a very high fertility subindex. How confident are you that the level of genetic gain will come true when bulls become proven in the near future?
Yeah, so look, I mean, that question links back to, you know, the answer I just gave in terms of the, you know, very confident that those young genomic bulls will continue to deliver. The question is rightly pointing to the fact, is there a risk that with these young genomic bulls that they could be over predicted? And that is something, obviously, we made the changes last year in terms of updating genomics to reflect that. We brought the cows into the training population. We've added a lot more cows into the training population just again recently, and that's going to be a constant exercise of adding newer animals into the training population so that we can, you know, just make sure that those genomic predictions are as reflective as possible of the current cow population. So it's a constant exercise of certainly keeping on check and calibrating, you know, that the genomics isn't over predicting, but what we are absolutely confident in is that its ability to accurately identify and rank animals based on overall profitability. And that's why, you know, year on year, the young genomic bulls are still staying out in front of the daughter proven bulls. If that wasn't the case, and I understand it completely, the concern that it's been raised, then in many ways you'd see the daughter proven bulls passing out the genomic bulls. There's something wrong with genomics, but that's not the case. So, but I accept the point. It's a constant monitoring exercise there.
And maybe just to add to that, Gavin, you know, when you talk about daughter proven and what bulls are on the active bull list, the vast majority are still only proven for daughter milk, and they wouldn't have a fertility proof necessarily. So, you know, daughter proven bulls, the index of those change as well, you know, and they can drop when the fertility proof becomes available as well. So it's not just genomic bulls will change.
That's perfect. Thanks, lads. There doesn't seem to be any more questions coming through there. So just before we sign off, there's just a couple of bits there before I hand back over to Dermot. I suppose just through the crop this year, through our dairy efficiency, we're offering all our suppliers breeding advice. So what we're trying to do is, again, the aim of the webinar tonight is to increase the genetic gain of our suppliers. So there's one-to-one advice available through myself. So we're basically sitting down with suppliers and going through the couple of reports, the EBI reports that Kevin and Doreen and Andrew were talking about there. EBI reports, crop performance, milk recording, going through that, looking at the areas where you can improve on. And we're just sitting down and looking for criteria on bulls, then helping farmers pick them out. And again, with the sire advice, if farmers do want a hand with that, you can give me a shout as well. So that service is available there. Our webinar tonight is also recorded, and our previous two in January are recorded as well. So they'll be up on the website in the next couple of days. No, I'd just like to thank the speakers on behalf of the crop as well, and I'll just hand back to Dermot just to sign off. You're on mute there, sorry, Dermot.
Right. Sorry, I thought I had done. I think there's plenty of food for thought for all of us there. As the first thing, just before I forget it, Joe Brickley is normally with us on these occasions, but unfortunately somebody else came up tonight, and he sends his apologies. He couldn't be with us, but I'm sure he's with us in spirit. I suppose the Co-op board went to New Zealand November, 12 months now, and one thing that strikes you out there, everything they talk about is related to kilos of solids, in their case, kilos of solids per hectare. And it makes life very simple. We get bogged down on percentages 360 and 330 and then average percentages, and of late we have more nonsense, maybe about 4.20 and 3.6 and that. And I think the Carbery board and I think the Bandon board as well are conscious of moving to talking about kilos of solids and moving in that direction as soon as we can. And I think the sooner the better. I think it clarifies from a breeding point of view as well, where the Bandon figures maybe are a bit lower than where they should be. And what we can see, the figures there's a lot of gain can be done. And I suppose if we start with the breeding and start with the heifers, you know, it's easy enough to achieve it over a few years. Gavin has the heifer rearing program, and I took part in that. And I know one thing, when you're weighing heifers, you do focus in, and certainly my heifers now are much more even than they used to be. And I think you just give it a little bit more attention on what you measure, you can manage in that. And it's not difficult. And I would advise anybody to weigh the heifers anyway, or get involved with Gavin, or both, or, you know. So I suppose the other thing that from Carbery, again, sustainability and carbon footprint is going to be front and center as we go forward. It kind of is at the moment, I suppose. But I suppose on a basic level on a farm, what it means is no idle animals. I think Kevin referred to it. There are no passengers. That every animal has to be productive. Every cow has to be producing at her best, and the heifers have to be coming on fit to replace those animals. So maybe we're a small bit sloppy. Maybe the fact that Carbery pays a bit more than the rest gives us a false sense of comfort too. I'm not sure, you know. ICBF, I suppose, the more I see what they're at there, and Gavin and Jor would have gone into figures with them about the Bandon herd and about solids. And there's a wealth of information there, and there's a wealth of information on the reports, and I suppose we should use them more, you know. So I would like to thank Doreen, who we've had several times and is always excellent, obviously, and Andrew and Kevin for I think very interesting, informative night and bit of food for thought for the future. And we have a bit of time to get our act together for the breeding season, and I think we should use it. So thanks to all the speakers. Thanks to Gavin for organising, and Jor, and I think we leave it at that. And thanks for your attention, and good night, everybody.